In the next 30 seconds, you will determine whether listening to this episode will be worth your time. And that's exactly the way it should be. So let me be direct. Don't ever underestimate the importance of your podcast episode intros. Do this one right, and you will be ahead of 99% of podcasters who talk about everything in the first 30 seconds, other than the topic they promise to deliver on in the title of the episode itself. So, yes, you heard it right. This podcast episode is about podcast episode intros. You will find out what makes a great episode intro for both solo and interview episodes, what repels people straight away, and a simple strategy to create a punchy intro that will keep your listeners, well, listening. All of this will be delivered through 17 rapid fire questions and answers. And by the end of this episode, you will never look at episode intros the same way again. Come to think of it, you might even develop a super sensitivity to annoying and drawn out episode intros. Consider yourself warned. Let's get into it. This is Say Yes to Podcasting, where solopreneurs learn how to start podcasts that attract their ideal clients and do the marketing for them. I'm your host, Anja Lordanic. Say Yes to Podcasting today. Question number 1. What is the actual job of an intro in a solo versus an interview episode? An episode intro has one very specific task, and it is to show your listeners that listening to this particular episode will be worth their while. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about solo or interview episodes, you need to hook your listeners in. You need to show them that what you're about to share in the next 20 or 30 or 40 minutes will be worth it. So, yes, as harsh as it may sound, the first 30 to 60 seconds of every podcast episode you create determine its success. Question number 2. Do solo and interview episodes need different intro structures? Not necessarily, other than the fact that when you're creating a solo episode, you're doing it by yourself and you know exactly what you'll be covering, compared to an interview episode where you will record an intro after the fact. So the conversation you have with your guest might take some unexpected turns, but when you're done with the interview, you have the opportunity to create a compelling intro based on the conversation you've had. Question number 3. How long should an intro be before people start skipping? I already alluded to creating a compelling first 30-second or 60-second intro, but the truth is, if you take your time and or if you're a great storyteller, your intro can be 2 or 3 minutes long. That's a non-issue, as long as it is telling your listeners what they can expect, what's in store for them, what they will learn after listening to this episode. Number 4, do I really need an intro, or is jumping straight into value a better move? I would argue that not everyone needs a good intro if you can deliver on the value straight away. But then again, if you don't spend at least 1 to 2 sentences explaining to your listeners what they can expect from the episode, that can be a bit of a tricky move. Because if you jump straight into value, your listeners are not really sure what to expect. So the short answer to this question would be create at least a short intro explaining in 1 to 2 sentences what your listeners can expect. Question number 5. What actually needs to be said in an intro, and what is just filler content? A good podcast episode intro should state the problem, preferably the one your listeners are experiencing, and speak about the relief, i.e., the episode they're about to listen. That's it. You don't need to talk about the weather, what you did last week, or what you're planning on doing this summer. They will get to know you later on, but in the intro, you need to be succinct and to the point. Succinct? This word always gets me. Question number 6. Do I need to reintroduce myself every time? Not necessarily, and I will explain what I mean by this. As I already said, your intro should speak about the problem your episode is about to solve for your listeners. But then comes the part of the canned intro. At least that's the case with this podcast and most podcasts you will listen to. There's this part called canned intro, which is the same for every single episode. But that is never, in my case at least, the first thing you hear. The first thing you will always be exposed to in my episodes is the hook, stating the problem, teasing the solution. And then you will hear the canned intro with music in the background, with me introducing myself and the show for 30 to 60 seconds max. And then we get into the meat of the episode. So technically, in every episode, I am reintroducing myself, but I'm doing that kind of automatically. I'm never re recording that part. That part has been recorded once, and I insert it into every episode of mine between the hook and the meat of the episode itself. Question number 7. What's the biggest intro mistake people make in interviews specifically? The biggest mistake I see podcasters make that makes me tune out of potentially interesting interview episodes is the fact that the intros go on for way too long. Podcast hosts often share the entire biography in an intro itself, while in reality, all we need to know as podcast listeners is what that guest is going to share with us that is going to benefit us in that specific episode, and not necessarily where they went to university, how many awards they got, or how many pets they have. No one cares. And I mean this with all the love in the world. Just tell me what's in it for me, the listener. Question number 8. How do I introduce a guest and make people care? Now, let's expand on the previous question a bit by answering this one. What's in it for me as a listener? What would I, as a listener, want to hear in the intro of an interview episode? Well, the most compelling thing for me to hear in that case would be the fact that the podcast guests I'm about to listen to worked with clients similar to me and what kind of results they got for their clients who are similar to me. This means that at the very start, I'm intrigued. I want to know how they help their clients and how they can potentially help me in the future. And that's how you keep the attention of your listeners, and not by listing the accolades of your podcast guest. Or if you have a really impressive guest in front of you, list 1 to max 2 achievements that would make your listeners lean in. And now, when you tune into an interview episode as a listener, pay attention to how the intro is created. Is it compelling or is it repelling? Question number 9. Do I need to put a teaser of the guest interview before my own intro? My answer to this one is it depends. In my previous interview-only podcast I had for a couple of years, this is something I did with almost every interview episode. And now I would suggest going with your own intro more times than not, because it is difficult to extract that one thought, one piece of information, put it in front of the entire episode as the hook, and hook your listeners in. It is easier for you to take the time to create an interesting intro yourself than to extract a standalone thought or a piece of information for a conversation that is so rich with context and with background information to create a compelling hook. It is so difficult to do. And I'm saying it's difficult because most of our thoughts require certain context, and most of our stories are more than a few minutes long. And to extract one singular piece of information and make it so compelling that the listeners will tune in when they listen to that 1 to 2 minute excerpt alone is challenging, to say the least. And here's another reason. 99% of podcast interviews go in many different directions, and not enough of them go deep into one single topic. Our conversations naturally take different twists and turns, so extrapolating one single idea, putting it in front of the episode as a teaser, can in most cases be misleading for the listeners, and that is the last thing we want. Question number 10. Should sponsored content ever appear in the intro, and if so, when? The short answer is no, but the longer answer is it may, and I will explain when. When it comes to sponsored content, the most important thing we need to emphasize here and remember for the rest of eternity is all of your podcast episodes will be listened to for the first time at some point or another. If you're doing a good job at marketing, you will have first-time listeners all the time. And if the first thing they hear is sponsored content, without ever hearing what's in store for them for that particular episode, it's a turnoff. So do with that what you wish. And my second answer to this question was it may. Yes, sponsored content may appear at the very start of the episode. And this sometimes has to happen because of the contract you signed with that sponsor. But I would always advise you not to sign such contracts with sponsors because you want to have complete control over the intro of your episodes because, as we said, they determine the success of your episodes. And I would bet my left arm, I'm a lefty, that your sponsors would want your listeners to actually listen through to your episodes. Question number 11. Should I mention my own products and services right at the start of the episode? Similar to the previous question, in 99% of the cases, the answer is no. The remaining 1% relates to offers that are somewhat exclusive and time sensitive. And even then, you have to do a great job of letting people know why they will benefit from what you're offering, especially, as we said before, since many of them will be first time listeners. So tread carefully with that one. Having said that, I don't want to discourage you in any way. You should absolutely promote your stuff on your show, but only after you earn your listeners' attention and trust, which for this episode is right around this point. So, if you would like to polish not only your episode intros, but your podcast topic, ideal listener persona, publishing frequency, workflow, repurposing, marketing, and so much more, I have something pretty cool for you. You can book a free 30-minute coaching session by clicking the first link you see in the show notes. In these 30 minutes, you will get free tips and next steps tailored to where you are in your podcasting journey right now. And the only catch is that we'll record the session for Say Yes to Podcasting, the very podcast you're listening to right now. And the goal is for you to get personalized answers to your questions and for others, for the listeners, to benefit from that session too, also for free, by tuning into that episode. Normally, I, of course, charge for those sessions and they're not recorded. So this is a great opportunity for everyone, if I do say so myself. So, if you would like to take advantage of that opportunity, book your free 30-minute coaching session by clicking the first link you see in the show notes or go to sayyestopodcasting.com/free. That's sayyestopodcasting.com/free or simply click the first link you see in the show notes. Now, if you are a first-time listener, welcome. Imagine if you heard my CTA, my call to action at the very start of the episode. You would be like, who is she and why is she offering this to me? She hasn't shared anything of value for me. And here she is offering something I'm not even sure I need. Anyway, back to our questions. We have 6 more to go. Question number 12. Should I mention what's coming in the episode or does that kill curiosity? You can absolutely mention what's coming in the episode, but you don't need to reveal all the answers straight away. You can open a loop at the start of the episode which you will then close throughout the episode. It's as simple as that. Imagine your intro being like, welcome to this episode. I don't want to reveal anything that's coming, but it's super interesting. Stay tuned. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound appealing to me. Question number 13. Should my intro stay the same or evolve as my show grows? My piece of advice here would be to always experiment with your intros. Don't take it too far though, because in podcasting, we always need to keep in mind the 60 to 90 day experimentation period. So always give yourself enough time to see if something is sticking or not, whether or not you're receiving positive feedback from your listeners, what the data is actually telling you, and so forth. And when it comes to the canned intro, the pre-recorded intro with the music in the background, that can also change as you get more experience and as your show is growing, because you might want to replace that canned intro with maybe different messaging compared to what you used before. And there is nothing wrong with that. Question number 14. If I change my intro, should I change it in all of my previous episodes? Not necessarily. That is a tedious process, and you don't need to do that unless you're doing a complete 180 with your show and if your show is taking a completely different turn. But if we are talking about minor shifts in messaging, then by all means, keep the old intros in the old episodes and start with new ones with new episodes. Question number 15. Is casual chit chat at the very start of the podcast episode building a connection with my listeners? I'm sure you've seen the chit chat at the very start in action many, many times, and so have I. And you know what I did in those cases? I tuned out. Because again, if I'm a first time listener, I want to see the value straight away. As selfish as it may sound, I want to know what's in it for me. And don't worry, your listeners will get to know you as the episode progresses, but you don't need to talk about the weather or what you're up to in the first 30 seconds of your episode. Question number 16. Should I change or test different intros for solo versus interview episodes? The short answer is yes, always be experimenting. Don't be afraid to experiment with your podcast. And if you're struggling with your own, you're too subjective, that's normal. Try to listen to other people's intros critically. See who has you hooked and who has you tuning out. That's the simplest way to test whether something is working or not, because we're all consumers first and then producers second. And the last question, question number 17: what's the simplest, high performing episode intro structure? It all comes down to this in simplest terms. Tell your listeners what they're in for. Share a statistic, a controversial stance, call yourself out or call them out. Tell them what not knowing what you will share will cause them. And most importantly, assure them they're in the right place, that they will find the solution to their problem, that they will be better off after listening to that specific episode. That way, they will be excited to keep on listening instead of reaching for their phone to press skip and find another podcast to listen to. So, we can all agree that intros and hooks and strategic planning we talked about today are all artificial elements of our podcast, but they're absolutely needed to motivate listeners to keep on listening. I heard this one recently. One podcaster said that hooks are an algorithmic necessity, and I really like that phrasing. So please don't feel bad for planning your intros, for crafting them for 10 minutes, because you will have plenty of time in your episode to be human, to be non scripted, to be natural. But you want your listeners to arrive to that point. And they will do that if you show them why they should stick around at the very start of the episode. And now that we've arrived at the very end of the episode, I would like to take a second to thank you for being here. I never take this lightly. And once again, I would like to extend an invitation to book your free 30-minute coaching session by clicking the first link you see in the show notes or by visiting sayestopodcasting.com/free. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week.